Refain lived a modest life in his weathered two-story house at the end of Pine Street, where time seemed to stand still. The worn wooden porch and faded American flag hanging by the door told stories of years gone by, while the quiet demeanor of its elderly owner gave no hint of the warrior who once led elite teams through the world's most dangerous missions. Few neighbors knew the truth about the man who spent his days fixing the old house piece by piece, meticulously restoring what time had slowly claimed. Each morning followed the same routine as Refain would wake before dawn, his military discipline unchanged by retirement. The creak of his rocking chair would break the morning silence as he sat on his porch with a steaming cup of black coffee watching the neighborhood come to life. His weathered hands steady, despite the years gripped the coffee mug with the same precision they once held weapons in distant lands. The neighbors knew little about the old man who kept to himself, though they would often wave as they passed by. Some wondered about the military memorabilia visible through his windows, while others speculated about his past. But Refain never volunteered information. He preferred the solitude of his home workshop, where he spent hours restoring old furniture and maintaining the house's original features with painstaking attention to detail. Tina Cooper, the local detective, had moved to the quiet suburban neighborhood 6 months ago, drawn by its peaceful atmosphere and tight-knit community. She had noticed Refain during her morning jogs, impressed by how he maintained his property despite his age. Unlike the other neighbors who seemed content with casual waves, Tina's investigative instincts told her there was more to the quiet elderly man than met the eye. The first signs of trouble appeared on a crisp autumn morning. Refain was replacing worn boards on his porch when the rumble of modified engines shattered the peace. 3 muscle cars with blacked-out windows rolled down Pine Street, their engines deliberately revving as they passed his house. He barely glanced up, his hands continuing their steady work, but his eyes tracked the vehicles with the instinctive awareness of someone who had spent years evaluating threats. The cars belonged to the Red Hawks, a gang that had recently moved into the area from the city. They had already marked several neighborhoods as their territory, leaving a trail of vandalized properties and intimidated residents in their wake. The local police struggled to contain their growing influence as the gang operated just carefully enough to avoid serious charges. Tina had been tracking their movements since they first appeared in town. She knew their pattern of starting small testing boundaries before escalating to more serious crimes. As she watched the muscle cars pass Refain's house for the second time that week, she felt a familiar tension in her gut. The gang was sizing up their next target, and something about the old man's house had caught their attention. The following week brought more drive-bys, each time with more cars and louder engines. The gang members would occasionally shout comments or throw trash onto Refain's property, but he never reacted. He would simply collect the garbage, place it in his trash bin, and continue with his work as if nothing had happened. His calm seemed to irritate them, their attempts at provocation meeting an unshakable wall of indifference. One evening, as Refain was securing his workshop for the night, he heard the distinct sound of spray paint cans rattling. The gang had become bolder, marking his fence with their signature Red Hawk symbol under the cover of darkness. He stood in his doorway, watching silently as the young men defaced his property, their laughter carrying across the quiet street. Instead of confronting them, he waited until they left before retrieving his cleaning supplies. By morning, no trace of their vandalism remained. Tina noticed the escalating pattern during her patrols. She had tried to increase police presence in the area, but resources were stretched thin across the city. One morning, she decided to stop and talk to Refain, catching him during his usual coffee routine. "They're testing you, you know," she said, leaning against the porch railing. "The Red Hawks, they're seeing how far they can push." Refain nodded slightly, his eyes scanning the street with practiced precision. "I've noticed," he replied, his voice carrying a quiet authority that caught Tina's attention. "Sometimes people mistake patience for weakness." There was something in his tone that made Tina pause, a hint of steel beneath the calm exterior. She had interviewed countless suspects and witnesses over her career, and she recognized the controlled power in his words. The gang's next move came without warning. Refain returned from grocery shopping to find his front window's shattered glass littering his carefully maintained porch. The Red Hawk symbol had been sprayed across his front door, larger and more aggressive than before. As he surveyed the damage, his expression remained neutral, but something shifted in his eyes, a glimpse of the warrior beneath the elderly exterior. Inside, he found his living room ransacked, furniture overturned, and family photos smashed. Among the debris lay his most prized possession, a shadow box containing his Navy SEAL trident and service medals now broken and desecrated. Refain stood motionless in the chaos, his hands steady as they had been in countless operations, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The line between his past and present had been crossed, and as he straightened a fallen photo of his old team, he knew the time for patience had ended. The sound of broken glass crunching under boots echoed through the house as Tina Cooper made her way through Refain's ransacked living room. Her trained eye cataloged every detail, the deliberate nature of the destruction, the gang's calling card sprayed on walls, and the systematic way they had violated this sanctuary. She watched as Refain methodically picked up scattered photographs, his movements precise and controlled despite the chaos around him. "We should get CSI out here," Tina suggested, breaking the heavy silence. "They left plenty of evidence." She pulled out her phone, but Refain's voice stopped her, quiet yet commanding. "That won't be necessary, Detective Cooper." He carefully placed a restored photograph back on the wall, adjusting it with military precision. "Some things need to be handled differently." Tina studied him, noting how his demeanor had changed. The quiet, elderly man she had observed for months was still there, but something else emerged beneath the surface. His posture shifted subtly. His awareness of the space around him reminded her of veteran officers in high-risk situations. "You know I can't just ignore this," she said, her detective instincts firing. "The Red Hawks, they're escalating across the district. This isn't just about your house anymore." Refain moved to his workshop, the one room the gang had left untouched. The space was immaculate, tools arranged with surgical precision, workbenches, clean enough for an operating room. He opened an old wooden chest, its hinges well-oiled and silent. "Did you know, Detective, that in my line of work we learn to read patterns?" His voice carried a weight that made Tina pause. "Young men like these, they're predictable. They mistake chaos for power." As he spoke, Refain's hands moved over the contents of the chest with familiar ease. Tina caught glimpses of military gear photographs, documents all meticulously preserved. 26 years as a Navy SEAL teaches you patience," he continued. "You learn to watch, to wait, to understand your opponent's weaknesses." He pulled out a worn leather logbook, its pages filled with precise handwriting. Tina's eyes widened as realization dawned. The quiet man who spent his days restoring furniture wasn't just any retired veteran. She had heard stories of SEAL operations whispered in police briefings, seen the results of their interventions in classified reports. "The Red Hawks, they don't know who you are," she said, understanding flooding her voice. A ghost of a smile crossed Refain's face as he closed the chest. "Few people do, Detective. That's how we operated. Anonymity was our armor." He moved to his workbench, picking up a piece of sandpaper, running it over a half-finished chair leg. But sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. Sometimes it needs to resurface. The next few days brought an unsettling quiet to Pine Street. The Red Hawks seemed to have vanished, their usual parade of muscle cars notably absent. But Tina noticed changes in the neighborhood's subtle shifts that her investigative instincts couldn't ignore. Security cameras appeared on corners, their presence unobtrusive but strategic. Motion sensors glinted from hidden spots around Refain's property, professional-grade equipment that hadn't come from any home improvement store. She found Refain on his porch one evening as the sun set, throwing long shadows across his damaged house. He sat in his rocking chair, seemingly relaxed, but she recognized the alertness in his posture. "You're preparing for something," she said, keeping her voice low. It wasn't a question. Refain sipped his coffee, his eyes scanning the darkening street. "In the teams we had a saying," he replied. "The best defense is knowing your enemy." He set his cup down with deliberate care. "The Red Hawks, they're not just random vandals. They're organized, methodical. Their attacks on this neighborhood follow a pattern." He pulled out a detailed map of the area marked with dates, locations, incidents, all connected with precise lines. Tina leaned closer, recognizing her own investigation patterns laid out before her, but with a level of tactical analysis that went beyond police work. "You've been tracking them since they arrived," she realized. "Knowledge is tactical advantage, Detective," Refain confirmed. "They hit homes near schools first, testing response times, then churches, community centers." His finger traced the pattern. They're not just marking territory, they're undermining community foundations, breaking spirits before breaking buildings. Tina saw it now, the strategic nature of the gang's movements hidden beneath apparent chaos. They're military trained, she concluded. Some of them, at least. Refain nodded slightly. Dishonorable discharges, several of them. They bring structure to street tactics. Makes them more dangerous, but also more predictable. As night fell, Refain's security system hummed to life, invisible barriers protecting his property. They'll come back, he said, his voice carrying the certainty of experience. Men like these can't handle their authority being questioned. My refusal to break it challenges everything they believe about power. Tina understood the implications. I should increase patrols, she offered, but Refain shook his head. That would only delay them, make them more desperate. No, detective, this needs to end differently. He stood, his movement fluid despite his age. Sometimes the only way to stop a flood is to channel it, redirect its force. Inside his workshop, Refain opened another compartment revealing sophisticated surveillance equipment. Screens showed thermal imaging of the surrounding streets, tracking movement patterns. I'm not looking for a fight, detective, he explained, but I won't let them destroy what others have built. This neighborhood, these people, they deserve peace. As Tina left that evening, she glanced back at the house. Behind the damaged exterior and broken windows, she now saw what the Red Hawks had missed. They thought they had found an easy target, a vulnerable old man. Instead, they had stumbled into the den of someone far more dangerous than they could imagine. The quiet on Pine Street wasn't peace anymore. It was the silence before a storm. The Red Hawks made their move on a moonless night 3 days later. Their engines cut several blocks away, a change in tactics that didn't escape Refain's notice. Through his surveillance system, he watched their heat signatures move like predators through the darkness, 5 men spreading out around his property with practiced coordination. Their movements confirmed his suspicions about their military background. The way they maintained spacing and covered angles spoke of formal training. In his workshop, Refain stood motionless, his breath steady as he tracked their approach. The security cameras fed silent images to his monitors, showing the gang members dressed in dark clothing, their faces obscured. They carried crowbars, bolt cutters, tools chosen for maximum damage. But what caught his attention was their leader, a tall figure whose movements carried the unmistakable rhythm of special operations training. Tina Cooper sat in her unmarked car 2 blocks away, her heart racing as she watched the scene unfold through her binoculars. Every instinct screamed at her to call for backup, but she had given her word. Trust the process, Refain had told her earlier that day. Sometimes the best way to stop predators is to let them think they're hunting when they're actually being hunted. The first sign of trouble for the gang came when their radios failed, producing only static. Then their phones lost signal, a communications blackout that should have warned them. But their confidence pushed them forward as they approached Refain's house from different angles. The leader signaled silently, and they moved in coordinated pairs toward the entry points. Inside, Refain moved like a shadow through his house. Decades of training had taught him to use darkness as an ally, and age had done nothing to dull these skills. He positioned himself precisely, remembering countless missions where patience and position had meant the difference between life and death. The gang's leader was good, but he had forgotten the first rule of combat: never underestimate your opponent. The first 2 gang members reached the back door, their tools raised to break the lock. The security lights stayed dark, giving them false confidence. As they worked on the door, a slight click went unnoticed. Suddenly, silent jets of high-pressure water erupted from hidden nozzles, the tactical deterrent system Refain had installed, catching them off guard. They stumbled back, cursing, their coordination broken. On the side of the house, 2 more gang members found their path blocked by a series of nearly invisible wires. Their frustration grew as they tried to navigate the obstacle course Refain had crafted. Every alternate route led to another barrier, their progress slowed to a crawl. The leader, watching from the shadows, recognized the tactical setup, his military training screaming warnings he chose to ignore. Refain's voice, calm and clear, cut through the darkness. You should have done better research. The words seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, a psychological tactic that had served him well in past operations. 26 years in the teams teaches you how to handle unwanted visitors. The gang leader's head snapped up, recognition flashing across his face. He knew that tone, the voice of someone who had commanded respect in the darkest places on earth. "The house is wired," he called to his men, his own training finally overriding his arrogance. "Fall back. Fall back now." But Refain had anticipated this. As the gang members retreated, they found their planned escape routes subtly altered. The darkness that had hidden their approach now worked against them. Motion sensors triggered carefully placed lights, momentarily blinding them. Hidden speakers played recorded sounds of movement from multiple directions, destroying their spatial awareness. Tina watched in amazement as the coordinated attack dissolved into confusion. Through her binoculars, she saw the gang members stumbling into each other, their tactical formation broken. Their military training worked against them now, as ingrained responses to threats led them into carefully prepared dead ends. The leader, realizing the trap, tried to rally his men, but Refain's voice came again, closer this time. "Your dishonorable discharge was for abandoning your team in Yemen." The words hit like physical blows. "You left good men behind because you were afraid. Now you prey on civilians thinking it makes you powerful." In the darkness, Refain moved with deadly precision. The gang leader spun, trying to locate him, but decades of special operations experience had taught Refain how to become invisible. "Your men, some were Marines, Army Rangers," Refain continued. "Now you use their training to terrorize neighborhoods. You dishonor everything they once stood for." The leader's composure cracked. He pulled a knife, its blade glinting in the intermittent light. "Show yourself, old man." His voice carried an edge of panic. The others gathered around him, their earlier confidence replaced by growing fear. They had come to destroy an old man's house. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a combat veteran's killing ground. Refain's next words carried the weight of countless battles. "I'm giving you a choice. Leave this neighborhood. Take your operation elsewhere. Or I release everything I've gathered about your organization to every law enforcement agency in the state." A pause heavy with meaning. "Including the evidence of your connection to the warehouse fire last month. The one that killed 3 homeless veterans." The leader's knife hand trembled. In the distance, police sirens wailed, growing closer. Tina hadn't called them, but she knew Refain had planned for every contingency. The gang members looked to their leader, their fear now evident. They had come to break a house, but found themselves facing something far more dangerous, a warrior who had turned his home into a battlefield. The gang leader's composure shattered as blue and red lights began strobing at both ends of Pine Street. The knife in his hand wavered as decades of special operations experience materialized before him in the form of Refain stepping from the shadows. The elderly man's movements were fluid, calculated each step, placed with the precision of someone who had spent a lifetime perfecting the art of confrontation. "Your men are separated, disoriented," Refain stated, his voice carrying the same quiet authority that had once commanded elite teams through the world's deadliest missions. "2 by the back gate, 3 near the garage, and you here alone." He moved closer, his presence filling the space between them. "Just like Yemen when you left your team scattered and broken." The leader's face contorted with rage and recognition. "You don't know anything about Yemen," he snarled, but his voice cracked, betraying his uncertainty. Refain's next words cut through the night with surgical precision. "Lieutenant Marcus Kane dishonorably discharged after abandoning your SEAL team during a critical extraction. You were supposed to be their commander. Instead, you ran." Kane's eyes widened, the knife dropping slightly. "How did you—" But Refain continued his steady advance. "I made it my mission to know everything about you and your operation the moment you targeted this neighborhood. Old habits die hard." A ghost of a smile crossed his weathered face. "We never leave our brothers behind, but we never forget those who do." From her position, Tina watched the confrontation unfold, her hand steady on her service weapon. She had positioned backup teams at strategic points throughout the neighborhood, their lights purposely visible. The other gang members were now effectively cornered, trapped between Refain's sophisticated security measures and the approaching law enforcement presence. "You're Red Hawks, they're not soldiers," Refain continued, his voice carrying across the yard. "They're lost men following a coward. You take their training, their discipline, and twist it into something disgraceful." He gestured to the damaged house behind him. You destroy homes thinking it makes you powerful, but real power, real strength comes from protecting others, not terrorizing them. Kane's composure cracked further, his military bearing crumbling under the weight of Refain's words. "You think you can just expose us?" he threatened, but the words sounded hollow. "We have connections protection." Refain's quiet laugh carried decades of experience. "Like your protection in the Carson Heights operation? The one that went wrong last week? I have proof of everything, dates, names, locations. One call, and it all goes public." The sirens grew closer, their wail mixing with the sound of Kane's increasingly ragged breathing. Through his surveillance system, Refain watched the other gang members panicking, their tactical formation completely broken. Some were already dropping their weapons, hands raised, as police spotlights found them. "You have a choice, Kane," Refain stated, his voice steady. "Surrender now, face what you've done, or try to fight. But remember," he paused, letting his words sink in, "I've spent decades dealing with men who chose the wrong path. This ends tonight, one way or another." Kane's knife clattered to the ground, the sound echoing in the sudden silence. His shoulders slumped as the reality of his situation crashed over him. The carefully constructed image of power he had built crumbled, revealing the broken soldier beneath. "They'll kill me," he whispered. "The people I work for, they don't tolerate failure." Refain's expression softened slightly. "There's always a way back, Kane. Not to what you were, but to something better." He moved forward, carefully retrieving the dropped knife. "Your men need a leader, not a tyrant. Show them how to face consequences with honor." Tina emerged from her position as additional police units arrived, their lights illuminating the scene. The other gang members were already being taken into custody, their resistance broken by the combination of Refain's tactical expertise and the overwhelming police presence. She approached Kane, her weapon lowered but ready. "It's over," she stated firmly. "Make it right." Kane looked at Refain one last time, seeing not just an elderly homeowner, but a warrior who had chosen to protect rather than destroy. With a defeated nod, he turned, allowing Tina to secure his hands behind his back. As she led him away, he spoke quietly. "We had no idea who you were." Refain watched as the Red Hawks were loaded into police vehicles, their reign of terror in the neighborhood finally ended. The night's operation had required every bit of his training, his experience, and his strategic thinking. But unlike his past missions, this one had been about saving lives on both sides, stopping the cycle of violence before it claimed more victims. Detective Cooper returned to find Refain surveying his damaged house in the growing dawn light. "The DA will want to talk to you," she said. "Your evidence, the surveillance, it's going to be crucial in building a case." Refain nodded slightly. "Sometimes the best victories aren't won with weapons, Detective. Information, understanding your enemy's weaknesses, those are the real tools of change." As the sun rose over Pine Street, Refain stood on his porch, coffee in hand, watching his neighborhood wake up. The Red Hawks' reign of terror was over, not through violence, but through the careful application of experience, strategy, and understanding. His house still bore the scars of their attacks, but like the warrior who owned it, these marks would become part of its story, a reminder that strength comes in many forms. In the days following the Red Hawks' downfall, Pine Street underwent a transformation that went beyond the physical repairs to Refain's house. Neighbors who had lived in fear behind locked doors began emerging, sharing stories of their own encounters with the gang. Each account reinforced the impact of what Refain had accomplished, not just protecting his own property, but liberating an entire community from terror. Detective Tina Cooper's investigation uncovered the full scope of the Red Hawks operation. Kane's detailed confession revealed a criminal network that extended far beyond simple vandalism. The gang had been working for larger criminal enterprises, using their military training to systematically destabilize neighborhoods, making them vulnerable for takeover. The evidence Refain had gathered proved instrumental in dismantling their entire organization. One morning, as Refain worked on rebuilding his front porch, a group of neighbors approached, led by Mrs. Henderson from across the street. They carried tools, lumber, and supplies, their faces determined. "You protected all of us," Mrs. Henderson stated simply. "Now let us help you rebuild." Refain stood quietly observing the gathering crowd, his weathered features softening at this unexpected show of community support. The restoration became a neighborhood project. Former military veterans who lived nearby recognized the tactical precision of Refain's security setup and offered their own expertise in reinforcing the house's defenses. Civilians contributed their skills, painters, carpenters, and craftsmen working together to erase the scars of violence while strengthening the bonds between neighbors. During the reconstruction, Tina noticed subtle changes in Refain. The quiet, reserved veteran began sharing carefully selected stories with the volunteers. He taught younger workers about precision and patience, explaining how the same focus that had served him in combat could transform their craft. His house became more than a restoration project. It evolved into an unofficial gathering place where skills and wisdom were exchanged. "You know," Tina remarked one evening, as she helped Refain install new security cameras, "this isn't quite how I expected things to end." She gestured to the bustling activity around them. "When I first started watching the Redhawks, I thought it would end in violence." Refain adjusted the camera angle with practiced precision. "Violence is easy, detective. Building something lasting, that's the real challenge." The impact of Refain's actions rippled beyond Pine Street. Other neighborhoods inspired by his example began forming community watch programs. Veterans groups reached out offering support to former service members who might be vulnerable to gangs like the Redhawks. The city's approach to gang prevention shifted, focusing more on community building and rehabilitation than mere enforcement. Kane's prosecution revealed deeper truths about the challenges faced by veterans returning from combat. During the trial, he spoke about the isolation, the loss of purpose that had led him down a dark path. Refain attended each session sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom, his presence a reminder that redemption was possible even from the darkest choices. 1 month after the incident, Refain stood in his restored workshop surveying the changes. The space remained meticulously organized, but now included a small seating area where neighborhood kids could learn woodworking and veterans could find quiet conversation. The security systems remained active, but were supplemented by a network of alert neighbors, each watching out for the others. Tina found him there late one afternoon as sunset painted the sky in shades of amber. "Just finished the final report," she announced, leaning against the workbench. "Kane's testimony helped us shut down 3 more criminal operations across the state. Your intel was perfect as usual." Refain nodded, continuing to sand a table leg with measured strokes. "Information patterns, they tell stories if you know how to read them." The detective studied him, noting how the events had changed him too. The warrior who had lived in self-imposed isolation was now an integral part of the community's fabric. "You could have handled them differently," she observed. "With your skills, your training." Refain set down his tools, meeting her gaze. "We're trained to eliminate threats, detective, but sometimes the greater victory comes from transforming them." As darkness fell, Refain's security lights activated automatically, their soft glow pushing back the shadows. From his porch, he could see porch lights coming on up and down Pine Street, each home now part of an interconnected community alert system. The neighborhood had changed, becoming stronger, more resilient. The Redhawks had sought to break its spirit, but instead had inadvertently forged it into something unbreakable. The following weekend found Refain hosting a neighborhood gathering in his backyard. Veterans and civilians mingled, sharing stories and skills. Young people listened intently as older residents spoke about community and responsibility. In one corner, Kane's former lieutenant, now in a rehabilitation program, spoke quietly with other struggling veterans about finding purpose beyond violence. Tina watched from the sidelines as Refain moved through the crowd. His quiet authority remained, but it was now tempered with accessibility. He had found a new mission, not in combat or confrontation, but in building a community that could defend itself through unity and understanding. The warrior had become a guardian, transforming his tactical knowledge into tools for peace. As the sun set over Pine Street, Refain stood on his restored porch, surveying his transformed neighborhood. The house bore subtle marks of its ordeal like battle scars on a veteran's body, but these only added to its character. In defending his home, he had helped forge something greater, a community that understood true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the power to protect and rebuild. The transformation of Pine Street continued into the autumn months, bringing changes that went beyond physical reconstruction. Refain's house, once a target of violence, had become a symbol of resilience and community strength. The security measures he had installed were now integrated into a neighborhood-wide protection network, with residents learning to watch out for each other in ways that made external threats think twice before targeting their community. Detective Tina Cooper's role evolved as well. Her regular visits to Pine Street became less about official police business and more about learning from Refain's unique approach to community protection. She found herself incorporating his strategies into police training programs, teaching officers to read patterns and understand the psychology behind criminal operations. The success on Pine Street was becoming a model for other precincts facing similar challenges. One crisp morning, as leaves danced across his restored porch, Refain received an unexpected visitor. A young man barely in his 20s stood nervously at his gate. Refain recognized him as one of Kane's former Red Hawks members who had been given probation in exchange for cooperation. The young veteran's hands trembled slightly as he introduced himself as David Mitchell. "I was there that night," David said, his voice quiet. "When everything went down. I've been wanting to come by to—" He paused, struggling with the words. Refain studied him, noting the military bearing not yet completely lost beneath the uncertainty. "To apologize? Or to understand?" Refain asked, leading the young man to his porch where 2 cups of coffee waited as if he had anticipated this visit. David's story emerged slowly between sips of coffee. He had served as an Army Ranger returning home to find civilian life empty of purpose. Kane had offered him direction structure, a chance to use his skills. "But it felt wrong," he admitted. "Using what they taught us to hurt people. I just couldn't see another way." Refain listened, his weathered hands steady around his coffee cup, understanding the familiar struggle in the young veteran's words. As they talked, other residents passed by, some nodding in recognition. Word had spread about David's visit, and rather than hostility, the neighborhood showed cautious acceptance. Mrs. Henderson even stopped to drop off a plate of cookies, her gesture small but significant. This was what Refain had worked to build, not just a secure community, but one capable of understanding and growth. "Your training," Refain said, finally breaking a thoughtful silence. "It was meant to protect, to serve something greater than yourself. That doesn't change just because you're no longer in uniform." He stood, moving to his workshop, David following hesitantly. Inside the immaculate space, Refain pulled out a worn leather logbook. "Every mission, every operation has a purpose. The key is finding the right one." Through the afternoon, more veterans began arriving, some from the neighborhood, others who had heard about Pine Street's transformation. They gathered in Refain's workshop, sharing experiences and struggles. David sat quietly, absorbing the stories of men and women who had found ways to channel their training into community service. Tina observed from the doorway, noting how Refain guided the conversation, keeping it focused on reconstruction rather than destruction. As the group dispersed, David lingered, helping Refain clean up the workshop. "I want to make things right," he said finally. "But I don't know how to start." Refain handed him a set of plans for a community center project they had been discussing. "Sometimes the first step is simply showing up ready to build rather than destroy." The following weeks saw David becoming a regular presence on Pine Street. Under Refain's quiet guidance, he began applying his military precision to community projects. Other former service members joined, inspired by the chance to use their skills for positive change. The workshop became a place of transformation, where the discipline of military training found new purpose in civilian life. Tina watched this evolution with growing understanding. "You're not just rebuilding houses," she remarked to Refain one evening as they reviewed security footage. "You're rebuilding lives." Refain nodded slightly, his focus seemingly on the monitors, but his words carrying deeper meaning. "The hardest part of coming home is finding your place, detective. Sometimes it takes someone showing you how to repurpose your skills." The impact spread beyond Pine Street as news of the program reached other communities. Veterans groups began sending their struggling members to learn from Refain's approach. The workshop expanded, adding new equipment and training areas. David took on a leadership role, helping newer members find their footing in civilian life, just as Refain had helped him. 1 year after the Red Hawks incident, Pine Street hosted a community celebration. The gathered crowd represented a cross-section of society, veterans and civilians, young and old, united by their commitment to protecting and supporting each other. Refain watched from his porch as David led a group of former service members in a demonstration of security techniques now adapted for community protection. Tina joined him, coffee in hand, observing the changes they had witnessed. "Kane's sentencing hearing is next week," she mentioned. "His cooperation has helped shut down similar operations in 3 states. Refain nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Sometimes the greatest victory comes from showing someone a better path." He gestured to David, now teaching a group of children about situational awareness through a game. They just need to see the possibility. As evening approached, Refain stood in his workshop, surrounded by the tools of rebuilding. The security monitors showed peaceful streets, children playing in yards, neighbors chatting on porches. The warrior had found his final mission, not in combat, but in transformation, creating a space where others could find their way home from their own battles. The seasons changed, bringing winter's chill to Pine Street, but the warmth of community remained undiminished. Refain's house stood as a testament to resilience, its restored facade bearing subtle marks of its history like medals of honor. The security systems he had installed now served as teaching tools, helping other neighborhoods develop their own protection strategies while fostering connections rather than fear. On a cold December morning, Tina arrived with news that would test the community's transformation. Kane's sentencing included a condition, she explained as Refain poured their usual coffee. He's requested to make amends starting here on Pine Street. The statement hung in the air, heavy with implications. The former Red Hawks leader, whose actions had once terrorized the neighborhood, now sought redemption in the very place he had tried to destroy. Refain absorbed the information, his expression thoughtful as he watched snow beginning to fall outside. "Redemption isn't given, detective," he said finally. "It's earned through actions, not words." Yet there was no rejection in his tone, only the careful consideration of a strategist evaluating possibilities. The community they had built was strong enough now to face this challenge. Word spread through the neighborhood, triggering a range of reactions. Some residents expressed concern, while others, particularly the veterans who had found new purpose through Refain's program, saw an opportunity to demonstrate the true strength of their transformed community. David, who had become a respected figure in the neighborhood's veteran support network, was among the first to speak in favor of giving Kane a chance. A community meeting was held in the expanded workshop space that had become Pine Street's unofficial headquarters. Residents packed the room, their breath visible in the winter air as they discussed this unexpected development. Refain stood quietly observing as different voices shared their perspectives. The fear that had once paralyzed the neighborhood was gone, replaced by thoughtful debate and consideration. "We're not the same people he knew," Mrs. Henderson declared, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had witnessed true transformation. "And maybe he's not the same person either." Others nodded, sharing stories of their own journeys from fear to strength. The community's response reflected everything Refain had taught them about understanding the deeper patterns of human behavior. The decision when it came was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Pine Street would accept Kane's request with conditions. A framework was established, drawing on Refain's military experience in rehabilitation and David's success story. The community would offer a chance at redemption, while maintaining the vigilant protection they had learned to value. Kane's arrival was deliberately low-key. He came early one morning as snow blanketed the street in silence. Tina accompanied him, noting how different he looked from the aggressive gang leader who had once terrorized these streets. His military bearing remained, but the arrogance was gone, replaced by a humility born of confronting his own failures. Refain met them at his gate, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. No words were exchanged at first, only a long, evaluating look between two warriors who had chosen different paths. Finally, Refain spoke, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen both destruction and redemption. "The first step is always the hardest. Are you ready to rebuild?" The rehabilitation program began slowly. Kane, like David before him, started with basic community service, working under the watchful eyes of residents who had once feared him. He shoveled snow from elderly neighbors' driveways, repaired fences, and gradually began sharing his own expertise in security and protection, but now focused on defense rather than intimidation. The transformation wasn't smooth. There were moments of tension, times when old habits threatened to surface. But the community Refain had built proved stronger than any individual's struggles. Veterans who had found their own path to civilian purpose stepped forward as mentors. Residents who had experienced the power of second chances offered support while maintaining healthy boundaries. Through it all, Refain watched and guided his experience with military rehabilitation, providing structure to Kane's journey. The workshop became a place of both physical and personal reconstruction, where the skills that had once been used for destruction found new purpose in protection and community building. As winter deepened, Kane's presence on Pine Street evolved from a source of tension to another example of the community's strength. He worked alongside David, helping to train new veterans in community protection techniques. His military experience, once used to terrorize, now contributed to building something meaningful. Tina observed these changes with professional interest. "You've created something unique here," she told Refain one evening as they reviewed the community's security protocols. "A template for rehabilitation that could work elsewhere." Refain nodded slightly, his focus on adjusting a security camera. "The principles are universal, detective. Structure, purpose, community. Sometimes people just need to see it in action." The impact of Pine Street's transformation continued to spread. Law enforcement agencies began sending representatives to study their rehabilitation program. Veterans organizations incorporated elements of Refain's approach into their transition services. The house that had once been a target of violence became a beacon of hope for communities facing similar challenges. 1 year after Kane's return, Pine Street hosted a winter festival. Holiday lights sparkled along freshly painted fences and restored homes. Children played in the snow, while adults gathered around fire pits, sharing stories and hot chocolate. In Refain's workshop, now warm with activity, Kane worked alongside other veterans, teaching young people about community protection through positive engagement. Spring arrived on Pine Street, bringing with it new growth and unexpected challenges. The neighborhood's transformation had attracted attention beyond law enforcement and veterans groups. Media outlets began requesting interviews, curious about the community that had turned a gang attack into a model for rehabilitation. Refain's preference for privacy was tested as journalists sought to uncover the story behind Pine Street's remarkable change. Tina noticed his discomfort with the attention during her morning visits. "They'll keep coming," she warned over coffee on his restored porch. "Success like this doesn't stay quiet." Refain nodded slightly, his eyes scanning the street with habitual vigilance. "Attention brings its own risks, detective. Not everyone appreciates seeing their methods challenged." His words carried a weight that made Tina straighten her professional instincts alert. The warning proved prophetic. Reports began surfacing of other criminal organizations watching Pine Street with growing concern. The success of Refain's rehabilitation program threatened their recruitment of veterans, a resource they had exploited for years. Intelligence gathered through Tina's channels suggested these groups saw Pine Street's transformation as a direct threat to their operations. One morning, Refain found David waiting at his gate, tension visible in the young veteran's stance. "They're reaching out to former members," he reported, his voice low. "Offering money, threatening families, trying to prevent others from following Kane's example." The news didn't surprise Refain, who had anticipated this response. Success in combat often drew counterattacks, and this war, though fought on different terrain, followed similar patterns. Kane confirmed these reports during a security meeting in Refain's workshop. "They're scared," he explained to the gathered community leaders. "What's happening here? It challenges everything they tell recruits about there being no way back." The former gang leaders' insights proved valuable as they worked to protect their progress from external threats. Refain's response was characteristically methodical. The security network expanded, incorporating new technologies and strategies. Veterans in the rehabilitation program applied their skills to identifying and countering potential threats. The workshop became a command center where military experience merged with community protection, creating an innovative approach to neighborhood security. Tina brought additional resources coordinating with federal agencies interested in Pine Street's success. "What you've built here," she told Refain as they reviewed security footage, "it's not just about one neighborhood anymore. It's becoming a blueprint for change." Refain understood the implications. Their success had moved them from defense to influence affecting the broader landscape of veteran rehabilitation and community protection. The pressure from outside forces led to an unexpected development. Veterans from other neighborhoods began arriving seeking not just rehabilitation, but sanctuary. Each carried stories of manipulation and threats from organizations that preyed on their military experience. Refain's workshop adapted, expanding its programs to accommodate these new arrivals while maintaining the careful balance they had established. David took charge of integrating the newcomers, drawing on his own journey from Red Hawk to community leader. "We're not just offering protection," he explained during a training session. "We're showing them another way to use their skills." Kane supported these efforts, his experience providing crucial insights into the methods used to recruit and control veterans. The community responded to these challenges with remarkable resilience. Residents opened their homes to veterans in transition. Local businesses offered employment opportunities. The support network that had begun in Refain's workshop spread throughout the neighborhood, creating a model of community-based rehabilitation that attracted attention from social services and veteran affairs departments. One evening, as spring flowers bloomed in carefully tended gardens, Tina found Refain in his workshop, reviewing security protocols. "You knew this would happen," she observed. "That's why you built such strong foundations." Refain adjusted a monitor, his movements precise and deliberate. "In special operations, we learned that winning the battle is only the beginning. Holding ground, creating lasting change, that's the real challenge." The workshop itself had evolved, becoming a symbol of this philosophy. Advanced security systems shared space with woodworking tools. Veterans learned traditional crafts alongside modern protection techniques. The space represented a perfect balance of skills, old and new, all focused on building rather than destroying. As pressure from outside forces mounted, Pine Street's response demonstrated the strength of their transformation. Each attempt to undermine their progress was met with increased community solidarity. The veterans in rehabilitation formed a protective network, using their military experience to secure the neighborhood while continuing their journey toward civilian reintegration. Kane's role proved particularly crucial during this period. His understanding of criminal organizations helped them anticipate and counter threats. Working closely with Refain and Tina, he developed strategies that protected their progress without resorting to the violence that had once defined his life. His transformation from adversary to defender became a powerful testament to the program's success. Spring advanced, bringing new growth to Pine Street's gardens. The restored houses stood strong, their surfaces marked by history, but their foundations unshaken. In Refain's workshop, veterans continued their journey from warriors to guardians, learning to protect through construction rather than destruction. The challenges from outside had not weakened their resolve, but rather confirmed the importance of their mission. The media attention, though unwanted, served a purpose, highlighting the possibility of transformation and redemption. Other communities began developing similar programs, adapting Refain's methods to their own needs. The quiet revolution that had started in one neighborhood was spreading, creating networks of support and protection across the city. As summer approached, Pine Street's transformation reached beyond its physical boundaries, becoming a movement that challenged traditional approaches to veteran rehabilitation and community protection. Refain's methods, proven successful through both Kane's redemption and David's leadership, drew attention from military officials interested in adapting his program for transitioning service members. The workshop hummed with activity as new initiatives took shape. Veterans Affairs representatives observed training sessions documenting the unique blend of traditional skills and security expertise that defined Refain's approach. The sight of former adversaries working together, Kane and David leading workshops on community protection, became a powerful testament to the program's effectiveness. Tina noticed a subtle change in Refain during this period. The reserved warrior who had once sought solitude now moved with the purpose of someone who had found an unexpected final mission. "You're building something larger than yourself," she remarked one evening, as they reviewed plans for expanding the program. Refain's response carried the weight of hard-won wisdom. Sometimes the best way to honor our service is to help others find their way home. The impact of their work became evident in unexpected ways. Local crime rates dropped as other neighborhoods adopted Pine Street's community protection strategies. Veterans previously recruited by criminal organizations began seeking out Refain's program, creating a ripple effect that disrupted established patterns of exploitation. The workshop became a beacon of hope for those struggling to find purpose beyond military service. David's role evolved as the program expanded. His journey from Red Hawk member to community leader resonated with new arrivals, helping them see possibilities beyond their current struggles. "We're not just teaching skills," he explained during a training session. "We're showing them how to redirect their purpose." Kane nodded in agreement, his own transformation serving as a powerful example of the program's potential. The summer brought new challenges as the program's success attracted both support and resistance. Criminal organizations, seeing their influence diminish, attempted to discredit Refain's work, spreading rumors and threatening participants. But the community's response demonstrated how deeply the transformation had taken root. Residents and veterans united, creating a protective network that proved stronger than any external threat. Refain's workshop adapted to meet these challenges, incorporating new security measures, while maintaining its core mission of rehabilitation through purposeful work. The space reflected the program's evolution, with areas dedicated to different aspects of veteran transition. Traditional craft workstations stood alongside modern security systems, each contributing to the overall goal of rebuilding lives. Tina's involvement deepened as she helped coordinate with law enforcement agencies interested in implementing similar programs. "What you've created here," she told Refain during a planning session, "it's changing how we think about community policing." The integration of veteran expertise with community protection was proving more effective than traditional enforcement methods. Kane's contribution to the program's expansion proved invaluable. His understanding of both military and criminal mindsets helped them anticipate and address potential problems. Working closely with Refain, he developed protocols for identifying veterans at risk of exploitation, creating intervention strategies that offered alternatives to criminal recruitment. The workshop's atmosphere reflected these developments, becoming a place where transformation happened on multiple levels. Veterans learned to apply their military precision to constructive projects, while developing the emotional tools needed for civilian life. The sound of power tools mixed with discussions of security strategy, creating a unique environment of purpose and progress. As summer progressed, Pine Street hosted seminars sharing their methods with representatives from other communities. Refain's quiet authority guided these sessions, ensuring that participants understood the fundamental principles behind their success. "Structure, purpose, community," he repeated, emphasizing how these elements worked together to support veteran rehabilitation. The impact on individual lives became increasingly evident. Veterans who had arrived broken and directionless found new purpose in community service. Their military training, once seen as a barrier to civilian life, became an asset in protecting and building community. The workshop's success stories multiplied, each one reinforcing the validity of Refain's approach. David and Kane's leadership styles complemented each other, creating a comprehensive support system for program participants. David's empathy, born from his own struggle, helped newcomers navigate their initial transition, while Kane's strategic thinking guided them toward long-term stability. Together, they embodied the program's potential for transforming lives. Tina observed these developments with growing appreciation for their broader implications. "You're not just preventing crime," she noted during an evening security review. "You're addressing its root causes." Refain's methods, by focusing on purpose and community connection, were proving more effective than traditional enforcement approaches at preventing veteran recruitment by criminal organizations. The workshop's expansion continued, driven by increasing demand for their programs. New equipment and training areas were added, each designed to support different aspects of veteran rehabilitation. The space evolved while maintaining its core identity as a place of transformation where military experience found new purpose in civilian life. The approach of winter brought new changes to Pine Street as the veteran rehabilitation program entered its next phase of evolution. Government officials from across the country visited Refain's workshop, studying the unique blend of military discipline, community integration, and practical skills that had proven so effective in transforming lives. The model they had built was becoming a national standard for veteran transition programs. In the expanded workshop space, now equipped with state-of-the-art training facilities, Refain watched as David and Kane conducted a joint session on community protection strategies. Their collaboration, once unthinkable, had become a powerful symbol of the program's success. "Every skill has two edges," David explained to the assembled veterans. "We're here to show you how to use yours for building rather than breaking." Tina's role had evolved as well. The detective now headed a specialized unit focused on veteran outreach and protection, implementing the lessons learned from Pine Street across the city. "What started here," she told Refain during their evening security review, "it's changing how we approach community policing nationwide." Her words carried the satisfaction of someone who had witnessed true systemic change. The workshop itself had become more than a rehabilitation center. It served as a command center for a growing network of veteran support programs, each adapted from Refain's original model. The security systems once installed to protect against threats now served as training tools, teaching participants how to safeguard communities through prevention rather than confrontation. Kane's transformation continued to inspire new arrivals. The former gang leader worked closely with law enforcement agencies developing programs to identify and redirect veterans at risk of criminal recruitment. His understanding of both military and criminal psychology proved invaluable in creating intervention strategies that addressed the root causes of veteran exploitation. The impact of their work manifested in concrete ways. Crime rates in areas implementing their methods showed significant decline. Veterans once vulnerable to criminal recruitment found purpose in community protection. The cycle of isolation and exploitation that had fed gang recruitment began to break, replaced by networks of support and opportunity. Refain's methods, proven through countless success stories, attracted attention from military transition programs. His approach, combining practical skills, security expertise, and community integration, provided a template for addressing the challenges faced by returning service members. The workshop became a model for military to civilian transition centers across the country. David's leadership style matured as he took on greater responsibility within the program. His journey from Red Hawk member to program director resonated with new participants, showing them a path forward through their own struggles. "We're not just teaching skills," he explained during a training session. "We're showing you how to rebuild your sense of purpose." The workshop's expansion included new initiatives focused on long-term sustainability. Partnerships with local businesses provided apprenticeship opportunities, while government agencies offered resources for program development. The model Refain had built proved adaptable, growing to meet emerging needs while maintaining its core principles. Tina observed these developments with professional pride. The integration of veteran expertise with community protection had created a new paradigm for urban security. "You've shown that the best way to protect communities is to heal them," she remarked during a planning session. Refain's response reflected years of experience. "Sometimes the strongest defense comes from building connections rather than walls." As winter approached, Pine Street hosted a national conference on veteran rehabilitation. Representatives from military law enforcement and community organizations gathered to study their methods. The workshop became a living classroom where success stories demonstrated the potential for transforming lives through purpose and community connection. The program's influence extended beyond veteran rehabilitation, affecting how communities approached security and social integration. The combination of military precision, practical skills, and community engagement created resilient neighborhoods capable of addressing challenges through cooperation rather than confrontation. Kane's work with law enforcement expanded, focusing on prevention rather than reaction. His insights helped agencies develop early intervention strategies for veterans showing signs of struggle. The program's success rate in redirecting potential recruits dealt significant blows to criminal organizations' ability to exploit military training. The workshop's atmosphere reflected its evolution. Advanced security systems shared space with traditional crafting tools, each contributing to the overall mission of rebuilding lives. Veterans learned to apply their military precision to constructive projects while developing the emotional tools needed for civilian success. In quiet moments, Refain would stand in his workshop surveying the transformation around him. The security monitors still displayed their feeds, but now they showed communities growing stronger together. The tools of war had been repurposed for peace, creating a legacy that would continue long after he was gone. The impact of Pine Street's transformation reached far beyond its physical boundaries. The program had become a blueprint for national change, demonstrating how communities could heal themselves by helping their warriors find their way home. The quiet warrior who had once sought solitude had created something that would outlast him, a model for turning military precision into community strength. As winter's first snow blanketed Pine Street, the story of its transformation reached full circle. The neighborhood that had once faced terror at the hands of the Red Hawks had become a beacon of hope for veterans and communities nationwide. Refain's house, standing strong against the winter winds, remained a testament to the power of purpose redirected and strength reimagined. In the warmth of his workshop, now a nationally recognized center of excellence, Refain watched as another group of veterans worked through their training. The space had evolved far beyond its original design, becoming a place where warriors learned to reshape their skills for peace. The security systems he had installed during the Red Hawks' threats now served as teaching tools, showing others how protection could come through prevention rather than force. Detective Tina Cooper's morning visits had become a cherished tradition. "Sometimes I forget how it all started," she remarked over coffee, watching snow fall outside the workshop windows. One house, one threat, one decision to stand differently. Refain nodded, his weathered hands wrapped around his coffee mug. "Every mission starts with a single step, detective. The key is knowing which direction to take it." David and Kane's leadership had grown beyond their initial roles. Together, they had developed a comprehensive approach to veteran transition that combined security training with community integration. Their story of transformation from adversaries to allies became a powerful testament to the program's potential. "We're not just changing lives," David often said during training sessions. "We're changing how communities see their warriors." The workshop's influence spread across military and law enforcement circles. What had begun as one man's stand against destruction had evolved into a national model for veteran rehabilitation and community protection. Agencies studied their methods, universities documented their success, and government programs sought to replicate their results. Tina's specialized unit implementing Refain's methods across the city reported unprecedented success rates in preventing veteran recruitment by criminal organizations. "The numbers tell the story," she shared during a security briefing. "Every veteran we help find purpose is one less warrior lost to darkness." The statistics backed her words, showing dramatic decreases in veteran-involved crimes across areas adopting their approach. The winter brought reflection as Pine Street prepared to mark 2 years since the Red Hawks' attack. The community gathered in Refain's expanded workshop space, sharing stories of transformation. Former gang members stood alongside community leaders, each contributing to the neighborhood's strength. The security cameras watched silently, their lenses capturing images of healing rather than threat. Kane's work had expanded to include consulting with federal agencies on veteran protection programs. His insights into both military and criminal psychology helped shape policies aimed at preventing exploitation. "Understanding the path to darkness," he explained during a training session, "helps us light the way back." His words carried the weight of personal experience, resonating with those still struggling to find their way. The workshop itself had become a symbol of possibility. Advanced security systems merged seamlessly with traditional crafting tools, creating an environment where veterans could rebuild both skills and spirit. The sound of power tools mixed with tactical discussions as participants learned to channel their military precision into constructive purposes. Refain's methods, proven through countless success stories, attracted international attention. Delegations from around the world visited Pine Street, studying how one neighborhood's transformation could guide global approaches to veteran reintegration. The quiet warrior who had once sought solitude found himself at the center of a movement larger than he had imagined. As winter deepened, the workshop, hosted graduation ceremonies for its latest group of participants. Each graduate represented a life redirected a warrior who had found new purpose in peace. David and Cain presented certificates, their own journey lending weight to each achievement. The ceremony reflected the program's evolution from crisis response to lasting change. The legacy Refain had built extended far beyond physical security. His approach, combining military discipline with community connection, created resilient neighborhoods capable of protecting and healing themselves. The workshop's success demonstrated how warriors could transform their skills from weapons of war to tools of peace. Tina observed the program's lasting impact during her final security review of the year. "You've done more than save lives," she told Refain as they watched the snow fall. "You've shown us all a different way forward." The warrior-turned-guardian surveyed his workshop, now filled with the tools of rebuilding rather than destruction. In finding his own way home, he had created a path for others to follow. Pine Street's transformation, complete yet ever-evolving, stood as proof that the strongest defense comes not from walls, but from purpose. The neighborhood that had faced down the Red Hawks had become something far greater, a blueprint for turning military precision into community strength, warriors into guardians, and conflict into peace. Refain's final mission, protecting and rebuilding his home, had grown into a movement that would outlast him. In the quiet of his workshop, surrounded by the evidence of countless lives transformed, he found the peace that had eluded him since leaving service. The warrior had completed his journey home, and in doing so had shown others the way. The snow continued to fall on Pine Street, coating the secured houses and protected gardens in pristine white. Inside the workshop, veterans of many battles learned to build rather than break, to protect rather than destroy. The security cameras watched over a community that had learned to guard itself through strength of purpose and unity of spirit. The legend of the quiet warrior and his final victorious mission would inspire generations to come.